morning, everybody. Welcome to the February user group. We're excited to have you with us. We've got in excess of 90 people registered, excuse me, for today's session. So there's clearly some interest there in relation to Eloqua and event registration. So today's session will be very hands-on. We have minimal slides to get through, and then we'll spend most of our time looking at the campaign canvas, forms, quickly at landing pages, and also the new email editor as well. So if you've not had a chance to play with that yet, we'll walk you through some of that today. So let's get started. The best way to really teach and to explain this process is to use a scenario. So we'll do that for today's session. Our specific scenario will relate to an event or a single city event. So that's a single event taking place in one city. I will explain a few other tricks along the way if you do have multiple cities or multiple venues, etc., and show you how to do that. And also, just to clarify for the purposes of today's session, we'll be looking at using the campaign canvas to deliver this experience, not the event module, which is an additional area of Eloqua that can also be used. If I remember, though, I will try and explain some of the differences of that as we get towards the end of today's session. So, as I said, we'll work on the campaign canvas. We'll work on form design and form processing steps. They're really the key areas that we need to focus on. Of course, there's emails and landing pages, etc., but really that's the guts of what we need to focus on. Look, I think it's always good to give a little bit of a quotation, not mine, but Mr. Jobs. And as he makes the point here, design is really about how something works. And in the context of marketing in the 21st century, it's really about that customer experience and designing an experience that delivers the best possible experience for people. So today, essentially, what we'll be doing is designing an experience. And so we'll walk you through the process to give you the basics on how you can design that experience. But I've got a question for you before we start, which relates to what are the single biggest challenges that you find when you're building an event registration campaign? And to make it a little bit easier, I've kind of prompted you with some options. So what do you find the most challenging? All you need to do here is click on the relevant areas, and we can move forward and see. So this is the audience participation part. So I'll need you to have a look at that. And you'll notice once you submit your responses, okay, gee, I wish I'd bet some money on what some of these responses might be. Actually, that's really interesting with the post-event communications. You know what? Sometimes I wonder if we are so focused on getting our invitations out the door and getting people registered that the post-event communications are really not thought about until the day after the event. But with a little bit of planning, you can make that process a little bit easier, that's for sure. But the campaign canvas is the winner, clearly. So, okay, all right, let's look at that together. Building the campaign canvas comes in at number 1. Post-event communications is number 2, which I wouldn't have thought necessarily. Followed by the form. Absolutely. Look, the form is an amazing part of Eloqua. Its ability to, what I think marketing automation, the form is really a powerful piece of that whole puzzle. But from an event point of view, it's also something that you can create as a template in many ways. So encourage you to think that process through. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail this morning when we get to it. So closely followed. Oh, we've got another vote in there. Still the same case. Yep. Then we'll equal forth, building the segments, adding people to a live campaign, building the actual emails, scheduling reminder emails. I suppose that really falls under the campaign canvas necessarily. So we'll factor that one in there. Okay, cool. Let's jump in and move forward with today's section. Thanks so much for answering some of those questions. So the easiest way, as I said, in order to really make this happen is to build out with a scenario. And the scenario that we're going to work on today is a product launch. So it's the XYZ product launch, and it's happening at the Shangri-La Hotel here in Sydney on Wednesday, the 11th of April, and it's a lunchtime session from 11:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. And our target audience are customers and hot prospects in the sales cycle. So we might come back to that every now and then, but that's essentially the scenario that we'll be working on today. So which parts of Eloqua are we going to need in order to deliver the most amazing event registration possible? Let's break that down. So of course you will need a multi-step campaign. Now ideally you would have a template and you wouldn't be starting from scratch, but we'll show you a template today. Creation of your segment is obviously an important part as well. The form, obviously emails and landing pages. So they're the primary objects that you'll be needing to use. So essentially when we look at the multi-step, this is really where your orchestration takes place. This is where you design the experience that you want to build. Your segment is what we obviously call the audience, and the rest, forms, emails, and landing pages are your assets that you'll be adding. Now, if we break that down into a little bit more detail, if we look at the campaign canvas, my experience is that it's often easier to have two campaign canvases. One campaign canvas that invites people, captures their RSVP or their registration, and then sends them reminders. And so all of those communications can take place on one canvas prior to the event taking place. When we talk about post-event communications, often because you don't actually have that content ready nor complete until after the event, it makes sense to have that as a second campaign canvas. Because remember, you can't launch a campaign canvas with incomplete information. And the last thing you want to do is create a fake email to put on a canvas because you're trying to get everything onto one canvas. It's very simple to move people from one canvas to another. We'll show you how to do that. From a segmentation point of view, there'll probably be a range of segments that you would build. You would obviously have the target guests for your campaign, and that would probably be a mix of people. It may be customers, it might be prospects, it may also be business partners potentially, and maybe even staff, depending on the size of your organization as well. And so you probably want to separate those out, maybe with slightly different invitations, depending on who they are. The seed list idea, a seed list is really just another segment. It's just another name for it, really. And the seed list is typically designed for people who are in your organization. It's everybody within the marketing team who should at least see that email and go through the experience just like everybody else. And so a seed list is something that you typically have that's quite static. You don't create a new one every time. It's just a segment that you drop onto most campaigns. You may have other lists as well and other segments. That's fine. Of course, they can all be added. That's not a problem. Now, when we have a look at your assets, so looking across here on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the form. And the registration, and the form will either be a registration form or an RSVP form. Let me quickly explain the difference. A registration form is probably the easier of the two. Well, it's certainly the less complex of the two. And the registration, basically, you shoot out an email, you invite people to register. If they don't want to attend, they're not really encouraged to register because registrations are only for people who are attending. However, when you ask people to RSVP, the inference there is that you want them to say yes or no. And saying no is not a bad thing because it's a little bit of engagement and it's information that you can capture as well. And so it's really up to you as an organization as to how you choose to do it. With RSVP, we generally ask people to RSVP, and it is a little bit more complex, but the complexity is removed largely if you create templates. So if the form is a template and it's an RSVP event template, you'll be fine. It's really quite simple. Then emails. So emails, you'll have numerous emails. There'll be multiple invitations. You'll have registration confirmation email, and then also the reminder email. Now, generally speaking, you probably will start with a base email, like your first email that outlines the event, etc. Once you get that email approved and everyone's happy with it, you can generally then do a save as, and with a few minimal changes, that can then become your confirmation email as well. And then again, you could take that email and do a save as, and that could really become your reminder email, just with a few slight changes, probably just to the copy. So while it will look like you've got multiple emails and you might get a bit overwhelmed, in reality, they're not that different. Then the last piece of the puzzle is a registration or RSVP page, which will contain the form that we looked at earlier. Now, the confirmation page, you can do that in a few ways. One is that you may create a generic confirmation page. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. Sorry. You might create a generic RSVP no page, which is what we've done at Marketing Cube. So regardless of the event, if someone does RSVP no, they're taken to a standard page, basically saying, thank you so much for taking the time to RSVP no. I think we have a picture of a tropical island on there, and we basically tell them that we really hope that they're spending time on an island sipping pina coladas versus coming to our event, because that would really be the only valid excuse. But that's okay. The confirmation page, clearly, yes, the confirmation page probably needs to be unique to each event, because your confirmation page may carry links to Google Maps, address and details, etc., times, and any other information that you may want to share as well. So if it's a registration event, you would simply have one confirmation page. However, if it's an RSVP event, you would have an RSVP yes page and an RSVP no page. So they're essentially the bits of the puzzle, the bits and pieces that you need to put together for your campaign. So let me ask you another question. Do you have a strong naming convention for Eloqua? By that I mean, does everybody in the team know that if I use this naming convention, that everything will be smooth and everybody will understand what we're doing? So this is about how you name the emails, the forms, the landing pages, all those bits and pieces that make up your campaign. Okay, this is the audience participation part, and I know there's a few more of you out there that can answer. That's looking good. Well, that's incredibly good news. Look, it's so important that I really would like to talk to you a little bit about it today. Just give you an example, maybe for the 33% of people that don't feel they have a strong naming convention. Let me just take you back one step, if I could, just that one final piece on that last area. So the orchestration, audience and assets, etc. Once you've got all those other bits and pieces, there are a few other areas of Eloqua that you will use typically for an event. So it's shared lists, shared filters. So shared lists become your source of truth in relation to who's actually registered or RSVP'd. And so we use the form processing steps to drop people into respective shared lists. And we then use those on the campaign canvas to make sure that we don't send invitations to people who have already registered or RSVP'd. Shared filters, you may use those on the canvas. You'll obviously use images. File storage is probably more so after the event, perhaps, or if you wanted to provide people with a PDF or a PowerPoint, potentially you can use that to do that. A field merge, clearly you'll want to personalize the communications. Dynamic content can be helpful. If you wanted to adjust the invitation potentially by job role or job category information that you may have stored, because the way you would pitch your event to a C-level executive may be different to the way you would pitch the event to a director, for instance, or an individual contributor. So if you've got that information stored on the contact, you could use that in your invitation just to tailor the invitation a little bit. And then obviously we'll look at insight from a reporting point of view as well. Okay, so let's jump in quickly and have a look at naming conventions. So the secret with a naming convention is that they be uniform, and with a little bit of effort, as I said there, it really will pay dividends in the months to come. In the context of an event, which is a great example, it's really easy for you to have in excess of 10 or more assets in play. Now, the key thing that you want to avoid here is confusion. You want to have absolute clarity, because there's nothing more confusing than if you're running multiple events and potentially have multiple events in the pipeline at the same time that you're running. You want to make sure that you send the confirmation email to the right people from the right registration form. If people are registering for Sydney, there's not much point sending them an email for the event in Melbourne. So a uniform naming convention can really, really help. Let's have a closer look at maybe some of the examples of emails and all the various bits and pieces that make up a typical campaign from an event point of view. So all of these various pieces we looked at just a moment ago. And so if you think about the multiple emails, multiple landing pages, arguably maybe just one form or maybe a second form if you do post-event communications offering downloads. You'll have a couple of campaign canvases probably. You may include dynamic content, shared lists, multiple images that you would use, and of course campaign-specific content being the copy and those sorts of things. Let me show you, give you an example. Let's say you're running an annual conference. And if you're running an annual conference, the last thing you probably want to do is refer to the email as the annual conference invite. My question to you would be, well, which year was that? Was it a particular department? Was it a particular region? I mean, where was this annual conference held? So an idea there is to potentially look at something like this. So what we're doing here, you'll see that we use the calendar year, so 2018-06-01 captured across there. And so it's the year, the month, and the day. Now for an event, it would make sense that you would actually use the date of the event as your prefix. So you would use that right across all of your assets that you'll be using that are campaign specific. The purpose of the 001 is that it's very likely you'll have multiple emails in the campaign. I'm sure you will. So this numbering process also helps you determine the sequence. So when you're dropping them onto the campaign canvas, you'll have 001, 2, 3, 4, etc. So, of course, the second option is obviously the better way to name your emails, and using something as basic as annual conference invite really sets you up for trouble further down the track, because it will cause confusion and you will at some point make the mistake of sending the wrong content to the wrong people. So let's break that down and give you some examples as to what that would actually look like. So for an actual campaign, it would be ideal that you'd probably have multiple invitations. And those invitations might go out every couple of weeks in the lead up to your particular event. Then, of course, at some point, you'll have a confirmation email once people register. And then typically you might look at doing 2 reminders. Then following that, you would also have a form. And in this case, we've said that perhaps you'll have a single registration form. As I said, if you're doing post-event communications, you may potentially have another form. Landing pages, at a bare minimum, you would have 2. One to hold the form and the second as a confirmation page. You'll notice what we do here is the name of the registration page and the confirmation page is identical. We just simply put a TY. Can anyone guess what the TY stands for? Makes perfect sense in our world, but thank you. It's the thank you page. It just means then when I'm looking at landing pages in Eloqua and I'm potentially looking at 40 or 50 landing pages, if I sort them all in order by name, I can then see all of the pages that relate to each other. So they're all right there in front of me. So it just makes it a lot easier to find things. Then campaign canvas, we'd obviously have a single campaign canvas. As I said, you may have 2 for post-event communications. And then images. Now, what I'd encourage you to do with images, generally when we go through training with customers, I encourage you to use keywords to describe an image. For instance, 2 business people sitting at a desk with a laptop or something like that, whatever, just some keywords to help you find them. However, if your images are campaign specific and are unique to the campaign and really can't be used for anything else, I would encourage you to think about using the same naming convention as you see we've done there by putting that numerical reference being the date of the event in front of your naming convention. It might just make things a little bit easier, a little bit of clarification. And then finally, you probably will have documents as well. So in this case, if we're doing an annual conference, in this example, it might be the annual report, etc. And so that would be a PDF. So again, if it's aligned to the particular event, let's make sure we lock in that naming convention so it makes sense. To help me get a little bit of an idea in relation to the number of events you're running, I want to ask you a question here in just a minute. But at the same time, just want to make sure if you do have any questions as we move through today, please use the chat function within ReadyTalk, and we'll be sure to try and grab those for you. So let me ask you a question. I'm trying to get an idea here of the number of events that you might run in a 12-month period. If you could help us understand that. Now, it's a little bit unfair. I know that we do have some people on the webinar today who actually run events for a business. So that's probably a little bit unfair. So maybe you guys could think about the events that you might run targeting exhibitors, for instance, versus the actual trade shows themselves with those thousands of people coming along. Okay, so 10 to 20 events a year seems to be the winner. When you're running multiple events in a year, there can be some other little tricks that you can play with to capture that information about people who are attending those various events, that you want to treat them differently potentially when the next invitation goes out. External activities is a great way to do that. You could also use shared lists as well. External activities is probably the most accurate one though, because you really want to understand who actually attended an event versus people who may have registered but obviously were perhaps a no-show or something like that. Okay, so almost, just on 40% are running 10 to 20 events a year. So the message I would really get out to you there, of course, is that templates is what's going to make or break your sanity. Just going to close that poll and we'll move on. Thank you. So I told you we'd have a bit of activity inside Eloqua, so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to build a registration event campaign, or an event registration campaign. Essentially what what you're ideally looking to do is to create templates. Templates should be really where you're able to think through the experience you typically want to deliver. And if you're delivering up to 50 events in a year, or 20 to 50, I think was the category, you absolutely want to do something that's going to save you time, but also deliver a far more consistent experience. So this is a Campaign Canvas template that we use. I've kind of added a few bits and pieces to it to sort of save some time for today, but let's walk through and understand what the experience is we're going to deliver, and then we'll go from there. So to begin with, we have our target guests up here in the top left-hand corner of the screen, and then we also have our seed list. And so our seed list, as I described earlier, that's really just more internal people. So that's the team at Marketing Cube in our example that will drop into the seed list. Then our first invitation goes out the door, and we wait for, in this case, a period of time. Now, ideally, because your event has a fixed date, and keeping in mind our events that we're doing here in our scenario is on the 11th of April. Now, the way I find that is much easier to do this is to actually have your calendar in front of you. So let me just get a calendar right here in front of us, and we can see what's going on. So I would go to month view, and we've got our event here on the 11th of April. And so if it's the 11th of April, now this will differ for everybody because you know your audience best. But so if I go back, say 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, that will take me back to the 21st. Okay, so if I launch on the 21st of March, what I might do then is wait until the 28th. So I'm going to come back to Eloqua and double click on my wait step. And so there we are, the 11th, and I said the 28th. So we're going to wait until the 28th. I don't want to wait till midnight because that's not a good time. I might wait till 10 a.m. All right, so our first invitation goes out. We'll wait a week and check on 10 a.m. on the 28th. First thing I want to do is understand, did they open the first invitation, yes or no? Now you'll notice that following that, I have 2 shared lists. So shared lists are populated by people when they actually register or RSVP in this instance to the event. So what we do is we have a single shared list, which is basically anyone that RSVPs yes or no goes into that list, and you can see that they're both asking the same question. Now you might ask, well, I've said here that they didn't open the email, but I'm asking if they registered or RSVP'd. Now, the thing is, you've got to factor in human behavior. So depending on your audience, again, you shoot out your email. Let's say I'm a partner at a firm, for instance, and I've got an executive assistant, and my executive assistant manages my diary. He says to me, do you want to go to this event? I'm like, absolutely, please go ahead and register me. So he'll go ahead and register me for the event, or RSVP in this case. However, as far as Eloqua is concerned, I didn't do that. So if I don't use this shared list, as far as Eloqua is concerned, I didn't open the email. And so it would send me a second invitation, which would be a little bit embarrassing because I have actually registered. So factoring in human behavior, we need to be clear before we send additional communications, and we use a shared list in order to do that. And when we get to the form, I'll explain how you populate that shared list. So yes or no in both directions. So you can see what we do here is we have a second invitation A and a second invitation B. So on this one, essentially it can be a repeat. So we take that first invitation, we would save as that particular email, and then drop it in here as a second email, and probably just change the subject line and also the scheduling of that email. So if the first invitation went out in the morning, maybe try the afternoon and potentially a different day of the week. And you can use the scheduling option to do that for you. Now these people over here, this email probably needs to be slightly different in the way it's worded, because these people did open the first invitation, but they have not RSVP'd to our event. So 2 things are possible. One is they got busy, got a phone call, got buried in another email, for instance, and forgot about it. Or they've looked and read the email, but perhaps made a conscious decision that no, they won't be attending the event. And so this email needs to just be a little bit smarter in the way that you then address them, not overtly saying, hey, I saw you opened the email, but you haven't registered, but I'll leave you and your copy development team to kind of figure that out. So now we progress down through the campaign canvas, and we're going to wait now until 3 days before the event. So again, if I open up my wait step and have a look at the calendar, we can see our event is happening on the 11th. Our template says to wait for 3 days. So the challenge there is that the weekend occurs within that time frame. So it probably would make sense to have that reminder go out maybe Thursday late afternoon or Friday morning. I think most of you would agree Friday afternoon is probably a bad time to send an email. As they used to say in the West Wing, it just kind of goes out with the trash. So just think through carefully when you want to do that. So that would be our first reminder that goes out to people. And the way we do that now is we adjust our shared list. So we look at a slightly different shared list, still populated by the same form, but slightly different. Here we're looking now for those people who have specifically said yes to an event reminder, said yes to the event. And so they will get the first reminder. Those people that said no, everyone progresses down here now until 9:30 a.m. on the day of the event or the morning of the event. So then at 9:30 on that morning, we come down, we check to see now if there's been any change in who has said RSVP, because it's very likely in that little time period, even though it's 3 or 4 days, the RSVP yes may have increased in number. And so if that's the case, those people will then get the day of reminder, and in that case, that would be the end of that particular campaign. So that's the beginning stages of where you might start. So that's a fairly basic event campaign. You, of course, can enhance that campaign by doing something like this. So if we take that and move that down, you may want to look at doing a last chance email, for instance. So let me just change that step. So last chance to register or last chance to RSVP is the name of our email. And I would want to include another wait step in there. So where will I get people to wait till? Let's have a look. So we click on our calendar. We know our event is taking place April 11. First reminders go out here on the 6th. So maybe we try the 3rd and we try 2 p.m. In order to make that change, what I now want to do is funnel everybody into these steps like so. So I'm just going to make those changes. The key thing here, though, is we still need to double check before we send any communications, has the person in fact RSVP'd? So you can just see I'm copying and pasting on my keyboard there, just using Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste. So we're waiting. Have they RSVP'd? No, they haven't. If they haven't, I'm going to send them this last chance email and then drop that here like so. If they have RSVP'd, I'll drop that down there as well. And so you can see very easily I've been able to make that change by adding in that last chance to RSVP email as well. So again, when you look at the email or the canvas, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 emails, plus 7 being the confirmation email. One of the biggest mistakes early users to Eloqua make is that they try to use the campaign canvas to send their confirmation email. You don't need to do that. The confirmation email should be sent by the form. You can use the form processing step to do that. Okay, so what we've done there is just make some modifications to the campaign canvas to include a last chance to RSVP email. The key thing is just making sure your timelines, etc., match up. There are a few other bits and pieces here on the campaign canvas that we should be aware of as options. Now, I prepared them earlier by dropping them over. I've got a question for you, and I don't know if you want to use the chat function to respond here, but I would lay odds that Eloqua has extended the reach of the campaign canvas. It seems to me that I can now scroll much further to the right than I ever used to be able to. Does anybody feel the same way? I'd love you to let me know what your thoughts are. If you've noticed the same thing, just use the chat function to send a yes or a no on that one. Okay, Now, what are these? So the reason I want to raise these with you, first of all, one is SMS. Often people ask, can we send SMSs within the campaign canvas? And the question is absolutely yes, you can. So SMS functionality is not native to Eloqua. It is an app, like many apps that you can add to the campaign canvas. And so at Marketing Cube, we have an SMS app that you can purchase and add to your instance of Eloqua. It's very simple in the way that it works. Like any cloud app, it's pretty basic. So there's the pencil option here, which is your edit button. Once you edit that, you're then able to build out a message. The nice part is that you can also personalize them. So here's an SMS that I prepared earlier. Okay, so as I said, I didn't want to sit here and type it all in. So I can add the personalization by using my cursor, and you'll see here there's a pop-up with all the different field merges that are available. So in this case, it would be the person's name that I would want to add. So I start my message off with reminder, hello, first name, maybe a comma. We're looking forward to seeing you at the Shangri-La Hotel on Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. What I've also done here is include a shortened URL for Google Maps. Really quite helpful for people, especially having it on their phone. Makes a lot of sense. So you may be familiar with how to do that, but just in case, here we have Google Maps open. And so at the Shangri-La Hotel, once I've done that search, etc., all I need to do is just take the URL from the browser. So I simply copy that, and I've got Google URL shortener available. I'm sure you've used this, so I don't want to teach you how to suck eggs, but if you just Google, funnily enough, Google URL shortener, you'll arrive at something like this. Simply drop it in, hit shorten URL, and then it pops up. And so if you just click the little button, you can then access that. So it'll copy it to your clipboard, and then you can paste it straight back into the SMS function. So if we go back into Eloqua, you'll see that's exactly what I've got listed there. Now, to wrap off that personalization, we can also use the field that you have within Eloqua that identifies the salesperson who owns the relationship with that particular person. So if I scroll down, I'll find salesperson. I can do salesperson first name, last name, or their whole name. I might just do first name. There we go. And so that's functioning. So all I have to do then is scroll down. I can hit save. Depending on the nature of how you capture opt-ins, etc., and those sorts of things, this is not clearly a marketing email. It's really just a reminder service. So you may or may not be able to turn off the default opt-out, for instance. But if you need to, you can have that on. So we hit save, and we're done. Get a confirmation message. It's configured. And we can close that. Now, as with any app, you always want to make sure you select the automatically route contacts with errors. So if there are any errors, i.e. you don't have a mobile phone number, the person hasn't provided a mobile phone number, then you won't be able to send an SMS. So you can route them to an email instead. So that would typically go down towards the bottom here, and we would then need to make a few changes to our reminder functions here. So let me get some space. Like so. I'm going to move that down. Then I would also be using a shared list, because if we're capturing people's mobile phone numbers, we then also want to ask them on the registration form, would they like an SMS reminder? So I would call that one SMS reminder requested with a question mark, and I'll need to create the relevant shared list for that. If it's a yes, we route them into the app, like so. If it's a no, we would send them down to the email. And so you might do something like that, for instance. And so that's it. That's as hard and as complex as it gets, just to give myself a bit more real estate. So once we send that SMS, we then route those people down here, and they wait now until the next day or the next reminder service that goes in. And so then you could repeat that process on the last one as well. So again, it's the shared list. We need to create a specific shared list for SMS reminders, but we can certainly do that. Do you have any questions in relation to that process? Yep, okay, sorry, I can see a couple of questions here. Can the Marketing Cube SMS app field merge on custom objects? That's a great question, Neil, and I believe the response is yes, but I will get an answer to that question and let you know. Amici, yes, we can definitely give you rough pricing on the SMS, the app and usage. That's not a problem. It's really quite minimal. As you know, sending SMSs is not going to break the bank for anybody. So it's really a fairly cost-effective way to use it. It's really quite interesting too. We have a client here in Sydney who purchased the SMS app probably 2 years ago, specifically for reminders. But once they had it, it was amazing all the other ideas that came up in relation to how we could actually use SMS in a whole range of different ways. So they use it on the weekend. It gets very busy at their office with inquiries. It's quite hard to reach the salespeople. And so they use SMS from the customer service team to get messages out to the sales team. So there's a whole range of ways it can be done. So if we don't have the mobile number, can we put in a step to ask them what's the phone number if they choose yes for SMS reminder? Sure, Anna, absolutely. There are a couple of ways you could do that. It would depend on the form, and maybe going to the form would be the next logical thing for us to do. So let me go to my form and say here's one I prepared earlier. So Anna, this will answer your question. Registering for an event, there's always the typical things that you would ask people: their first name, their last name, their email address. Keeping in mind it's helpful sometimes maybe to add a little notification. You can see here what we've done is we put a little note there saying the email address you use to register must be unique to you. Now, of course, you can't control what they put in there, but it just kind of sends the message that, please don't use generic emails like inquiries@xyzcompany.com.au or something like that. You may then ask for the person's job title, their company name, thinking through also perhaps the things that you need to have on a name tag, for instance, something like that. The person's RSVP. And so from an RSVP point of view, the response would be either a yes or a no. And you want this to be a single select pick list and not a radio button, because you can't make radio buttons required, but you can make the pick list required. Always a good idea to gather opt-ins, and we like to keep it nice and nondescript. I'm sure you understand. Please opt me into future event invitations. Something nice and simple, whatever your legal team or in-house counsel advise that you should do. And then the rest of these fields that you can see at the bottom, these are actually all hidden fields. So these are standard pieces of information that we then hardwire onto each form submission. So mobile phones, let's have a look. So we would need a contact field to find the mobile phone. Here it is, mobile phone. And let me just drag that up because it would make more sense to have it up here. So we need mobile phone. Now the question that you probably want to ask is, would you like to receive an SMS message? So that's best done using, again, a single select pick list. And so we would use a custom field to grab that. So again, I'll just drop that into my form, move that up like so, and modify the field label. Would you like an SMS reminder? There we go. And you need to select the list to go with that. And I have a yes or no pick list ready to go. There we go. So I select that. And my default should be please select, which it is, etc. Now we need to make that required, but we don't want to make a mobile phone required. There's two ways you can do this, right? So this approach relies on the intelligence of the individual submitting the form, okay? So they've just said yes to an SMS reminder, and then we're asking them for a mobile phone. Now this one is required, so they must answer yes or no. With the mobile phone though, if the person says no, you don't want to then necessarily make the mobile phone required, okay? So that's what I'm able to do as a basic non-HTML Eloqua user, Derek. If you want to make that form more intelligent, and you certainly can do that, where, for instance, that if somebody does say, so let's take the experience now onto the landing page, so they're on the website, they're looking to register. If they say, would you like an SMS reminder, with some HTML magic, what you can do then is force them to provide a mobile phone number, or it can merge if it's already on file and they can just validate that. But that's how you would drive that experience. There's kind of two ways to do it. We typically don't create our forms in that fashion. We do it just like this, and we rely on the intelligence of the people submitting the form to know that if they want an SMS reminder, well, they're really going to have to provide us with their mobile phone number. And honestly, 99.9% of the time, that works fine. But you can make changes should you need to. Okay, so I'm just going to save those changes that we've made to that form. And I've got an error. Now, this error, duplicates. All right, cool. What have I done? Let's have a look. Oh, let me get rid of that. I think that might be it. No. Now, this is the fun part, right? There was people had made comments about forms and having some challenges with forms. So let me see where that error is. Would you like an SMS reminder? Okay, so if we're going to capture SMS reminders, we need to add a processing step in order to capture that. So add to shared contact list. This is just the placeholder. I need to actually create the shared list. So this is SMS reminder equals yes. And we should create a shared list for the no's as well. It just makes life a little bit easier further down the track. So SMS reminder equals no. Okay. Let me walk you through these processing steps, because this, and again, this is if you create a template, you're going to have a much better experience than if you try to create this every single time. So the first processing step is to update the contacts with the form data. This is the critical one, really, because if the person filling in the form is not already in Eloqua, then Eloqua won't create a contact. It'll simply hold that information within the form, and then you'll have to manually export, upload, create the contacts, etc. Not the end of the world, but it just, it's a marketing automation platform, so you want to take advantage of that automation. So what we're doing here essentially is just mapping all of the relevant fields. That one I can see is incorrect because salesperson mobile is different to mobile phone. So if I type in salesperson, I get salesperson mobile. That's much better. Then, yeah, actually that might have been the error, I think. Let me save that. Yeah, I think that was the error. So Eloqua had gone ahead and mapped two different fields to the same field on the contact. So again, your source field is the form and your target field is the Eloqua contact. So that's all taken care of. The next one. Now this one, you'll remember on the form itself that I asked people the question, would they like to opt into future events? If people tick the box to say yes, well, I need to process that. And in our world, that would be an email group. And so it's the event subscription opt-in. The key thing you need to do, though, is to set the conditional step on that. So if I double-click on conditional, oops, I clicked too many times. What I was doing here is I'm wanting to update the contact based on a form field, which you can see here. The form field in question is the opt-in. So I double-click, and this populates here on the right-hand side. And then a tick. When you've got a box in Eloqua with a tick in it, the value that you need to enter is the word on. So lowercase o-n for on. And it must be exactly. So that now means if people tick that box, register for the event, they will be opted in and their contact will be updated to reflect a subscription to events. Then the confirmation email. So we need to obviously build out an email. Now, because we've asked people to RSVP in this example, again, we need to be careful who we send the email to. We don't want to send the confirmation email to somebody who RSVP'd no. So again, we look at conditionally. This one is specifically based on a form field again. The form field in question is the RSVP field. And in our world, the RSVP must equal yes. Now, it's really important that the value that you enter here is the value of the field. Let me explain. I'm just going to go back and we'll have a look at the value. So here's the please RSVP field sitting on the form. And on the pick list, you can see it says, please select yes, I'm attending, or no, I can't make it. They're not the values. That's the display name. So you can see here on the screen now, we have the display name and the actual value. It's the actual value that you must use when you're configuring those conditional steps in the form processing steps. So again, the actual value that you can see there, if I close that, if we go back to processing steps, we look at the condition, and that's the word yes, as you see there. You may want to think through as a team and make sure everybody's on the same page that you always do capital Y, lowercase e and s. It is case sensitive, and so it must match identically to the value in the pick list. If you can get everybody on the same page, it's a lot easier. All right, so a notification email. So you may want to send notification emails. Now, these are internal communications. They're Oracle Eloqua branded emails, and they would be sent typically to people within your team. Now, you can do it several ways. You can hardwire in an email address and have that information there. You can also choose the subject line of the email based on a value within the form itself. You'll see there's a few options there. I've chosen lead source most recent because the lead source most recent is the name of the event. Does that make sense? Subscribe contacts globally. Really important that you do this one. So the reason that this is important is that should you be running the event and somebody registers who has previously globally unsubscribed, you'll lose them. They'll fill the form in, but Eloqua will never send them an email. So it's always a good practice to have the subscribe contacts globally built into every form that you do. And now the fun stuff. Because we're asking people to RSVP, we have the option of yes or no. And so that means we have multiple buckets, if I can use that term. So we have multiple buckets, and a shared list is a bucket, essentially. And when a shared list is first created in Eloqua, it's empty. There's nothing in it. The way you put people into shared lists is through certainly the campaign canvas is one way, but you can also do it directly here from the form, and this is what we'll do. We'll use the form processing steps in order to do that. We want to drop everybody into the yes RSVP list, but it will be based on a condition again. So in this case, it's the please RSVP, and if they RSVP yes, we're going to drop them into that shared list. Now, the other thing that you want to do is have a shared list that captures all RSVPs regardless of yes or no. And we'll go back and show you on the canvas why that's important. So that's the second shared list. You also want to have a shared list that captures those people who said no. And again, that needs to have a condition placed on it. And the condition in this case would be that the RSVP exactly matches no, like so. Now, you'll notice we've used the add to shared contact list, but we also need to use the remove. Now, this can get a bit confusing for people. So this is, again, why I use templates. Now, if somebody initially RSVPs yes, and then you send out additional communications, most likely the reminder emails, you may invite people to update their RSVP in case they can no longer make it. So if that's the case, that's fine. They'll come back to the form. The form will pre-populate. They'll change their RSVP to no. We then need to manage that process using the form processing steps. So if they have previously said yes, now they say no, there are a few things that need to happen. One is we need to take them out of the yes list and we need to add them to the no list. Now, because they've said no, that's fine. This will automatically add them to the no list. That's taken care of. But it's the remove option here to take them out of the yes list that is important. So again, and I literally, honest to goodness, I write this out in the description here. So I've said remove from yes if RSVP equals no. I know it sounds really lame, but I just find it much easier to look and know exactly what I'm doing. So again, conditionally, if the response is no, we want to remove them from the yes list, and that's the yes list that you can see at the top here on the screen. And so we just repeat the process there. So if somebody has previously said no, but now they're saying yes, again, you want to manage that process as well. And same with your SMSs, we would add them to the yes and a no list, and then we would also have two more processing steps there to remove them from the respective SMS reminder steps as well. Now, for confirmation pages, again, you need to make sure that you're sending people to the right page based on their RSVP. So if they're saying yes, we want to send them to that. Again, the conditional step needs to be activated. And then if it's a no, what we've done is we've created a generic RSVP page, and you can see in my naming convention there that that's the RSVP equals no. Okay, now we're quickly running out of time, and I've probably got another 10 minutes. So if you're able to stay on the line, I'd love for you to stay on the line. We're just going to have a very quick look at the new email editor and show you how to do add to calendar and those sorts of things, which are often other bits and pieces that people need for these types of events. So let's quickly have a look at that. And if I go to create an email, all of you will notice these new templates that are available. Now, of course, they're not branded, so you will need to go through a process of creating those. And of course, the guys at Marketing Cube are happy to help you with that if you need a hand. But I've created an event invitation here. So I'm going to grab that. It's an event, so I'll choose the event email group. I'll work on my subject line later. I'm going to jump straight into the design email. Okay. Now I've enlarged my screen a little bit so it makes it a bit easier for you to see. So you would normally get a little bit more screen real estate. Now, because it's a placeholder, essentially you can see it's Lorem Ipsum everywhere. So I'm going to remove that placeholder and I'm going to replace it with an image. And I can search for the image by browsing. Now I'm trying to remember if I was really clever. Let me just see. Did I? I did. Okay. So here's my event-specific image for the email banner, which carries the same date as our event. And I thought the rocket launch over in Cape Canaveral last month was a good idea. Coming here, and it's Wednesday, the 11th of April, 2018. I possibly don't want that in bold as well, so I can just change that, and it's the Shangri-La Hotel, 176 Cumberland Street, Cumberland Street in Sydney. And again, I can just highlight that and remove the bold, and we'll say at 11:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. as per our brief. Okay. Then if we wanted to add some more images, what I deleted before, I didn't have to do that. You notice there's a trash icon right there. You don't need to do that. Once you highlight it, the menu over here on the left-hand side changes, and I can just simply choose replace. So if I now look for my images, which I think are both 600 by 400 of the Shangri-La, here we go. We've got a photograph of the meeting room. So I can drop that in. Then I'm going to grab my other image, which is also 600 by 400. Jamie's got a question there. Hang on, Jamie. Let me just add this image. So Jamie asked the question, I may have missed this, why do we have a shared list for yes and no? Because you're asking people to RSVP, there's obviously going to be an outcome of yes and no. And if people change their decision from no to yes, then we need to have that recorded somewhere. And it's not enough to just simply have it sitting in the form submission data. So that's why we use the shared list to be able to move people from one to the other. That's essentially why. It can flow through into the CRM as well if you felt that was valuable for campaign level reporting within the CRM. But yes, that's why you would need to have both the positive and the negative, so you can move people from one list to the other should they change their RSVP at some point. Okay, so now we've added some images. For instance, we'll pretend our copy and everything is fine. What I wanted to show you was the add to calendar. So add to calendar, I really hate to say this, it is easier on a Mac, but let me show you. So if I get my calendar, so literally in the Apple world, I'm off to iCal. I'm going to find our event. That's on my annual leave there. Here it is. And so I have on the 11th of April from 11:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. Our event. So and you need to be able to do the same thing from Outlook, of course, or Gmail. It's just that it's a little bit easier on the Mac. So what I'm able to do is simply take that. I can highlight. You see, I can click on there. It's just now highlighted. If I take that and drag it to the desktop, it automatically produces a .ics file, which is what you need in order to add to Eloqua. So if I do add to calendar, which I wouldn't do in this particular email, obviously, but just to give you an example. So I highlight that, and it's a file in file storage that I want. And click on Browse, but I need to upload it. But let me just show you. So here's one I prepared earlier. So we have, I'll choose an event here. These are all .ics files, etc. So simply click on it and add it, etc. So now when people receive that communication, they'll be able to click on the Add To button, excuse me, it disappeared on you there. They'll be able to add that event to their particular calendar. So that makes sense. So very simple to do. It's really just getting in that .ics file from your email client and then uploading it to Eloqua, just like you would a PDF or any other file that you need to add to the system. Just some other key things to think about in relation to the new editor. It's really quite simple to readjust things and move things around. So for instance, at the moment you can see this is sort of 2/3, 1/3. If I decided I really would prefer to use maybe more of a 50-50 description, I can do that by dragging things around like so. So I can click and then just simply drag. You'll see the handles that appear on each one. And then I simply come up here and I can delete that row. Now the buttons, you've got options with the buttons. You can either fit to text or you can fix to width, and obviously you can change the color of those buttons as well. The nice thing is if you've got your custom colors, which I'm sure most of you would from a branding point of view, once you add your custom colors, they appear here at the bottom. And as long as you're using the same browser, the browser actually remembers the colors, which is kind of nice. So you click on custom color, create a custom color, and then it appears here across the bottom. And like us, you're probably using many of the same colors to be on brand, etc. So it just makes that a little bit easier. And if you hover over them, it'll actually give you the hex code. So for instance, our gray is there. That's the Oracle red, for instance, and then there's the Marketing Cube red. So that's quite helpful in that process. Now, depending on what you wanted to do here, you can drop in dynamic content as well, like so, and browse and find your dynamic content. You may want to use signatures to personalize the communications as well, which is obviously always a plus. So depending on how you do those. And so there's ours. Now, once you drop that in, you may want to also adjust padding. So once it's highlighted, again, the menu here on the left-hand side changes. And I'm finding that about 20 pixels on either side is kind of nice and neat. The other option you've got, which I love, is just a little bit of spacing. So this one here is just literally just spacing. And when you click on that, you can see you can adjust the pixel description there as well. And of course, you can color code it if you want to as well. So just create a little bit of space there. But look, we're honestly finding the new editor a delight to use. It's really speeding up the process for the customer success team here at Marketing Cube to get things done for us. We have had a hand from the guys, and when I say the guys, I'm referring to our support team, because you come first, I promise you. It always takes a while for us to get the support because you come first. But the support team have helped out just making some changes to our headers and footers. Some of the headers and footers were coded a little bit differently with the old editor and needed a few changes to them. And so that's just made that whole process quite a bit easier, which is really helpful. So let's go back to ReadyTalk. And I've got another question for you. So given what we've covered today, which has been reasonably extensive, where are your confidence levels in relation to, and keep in mind you'll get a replay, so you'll be able to watch this as well. So while you're answering that question, there's a couple of questions on screen here. Okay, Annabelle. Hi, Derek. Is there still a choice between the new editor and the old editor, or is the new style editor available? The only. Okay, so at the moment, Annabelle, you've got access to both formats within Eloqua, with the new editor, which I've just shown you here just a few moments ago, and you've still got the old editor as well. So you've got both to play with at the moment. Look, I'm not 100% clear on whether or not Eloqua will be sunsetting the older editor. If we can get some confirmation from Eloqua on that one. We'll certainly pass that on in some post-event communications. Trevor asked the question, how can I choose the new editor? I only see the old. So Trevor, the new editor is now generally available, and it's actually being rolled out right now. So depending on which pod you're on, you may not see it just yet, but it should only be a matter of days away. The only other thing that could have happened, depending on your organization may have asked Eloqua to not roll out the new editor, which I can't imagine they would, but that would really depend. You'd probably need to be an enterprise client, I think, in order to have that level of flexibility. But Trevor, you should be seeing it, and you should see it soon. Like literally, the rollouts for the updates, as you can see here on the screen, they finish at the end of this month. What are we now, the 27th? So it shouldn't be too far away. So at the end of each of our user groups, we try to give you a wrap-up of just some of the release highlights that have been happening. The big one, of course, this month is the new design editor. It's now generally available, and in software speak, that means everybody should have access to it. Fully responsive emails, and that's the nice thing to understand, is this editor gives you mobile responsive emails out of the box. So you can test them on screen with an Eloqua, or you can send them directly to your own mobile phone, and you'll be able to see how that works. Elements resize automatically. You'll notice that what I was doing there with some of those images I dropped in, while the email is 600 pixels wide, my banner was 1200 pixels, and those individual images that I dropped in below were 600 by 400. So what I'm trying to do there is just compensate potentially for people who might have high-res devices, for instance. I just want to make sure the images look as good as they should. The field mergers, shared content, dynamic content, all available, and we showed those to you. The next one would relate to those clients who might be using Oracle Sales Cloud. With Eloqua, there's been enhancements to an app that they've been developing. It's now generally available as well, which really enhances that integration experience for you between Oracle Sales Cloud and Eloqua. But the last one I really wanted to focus on just quickly is the LinkedIn Campaign Manager app, which I know some of you are using, and this is important. You need to understand that there's a couple of things that your administrator will need to take care of, and that is that they need to re-authenticate their LinkedIn accounts prior to the 30th of March. So it gives you just over a month to do it, and it'll be a 5-minute exercise. But they must be re-authenticated before the 30th of March. So if you are using the LinkedIn Campaign Manager app, which as I said, I know many of you are, you'll find some information there. And lastly, just a little bit of selfish and shameless promotion. For those of you in Sydney or around Sydney on the 1st of May, Marketing Cube is delighted to be exhibiting at Oracle Cloud World, which is taking place at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. We'll provide some information to you over the coming weeks. We'd love to see you there. These events are fantastic, whether you're an Eloqua customer or not, or exploring marketing automation. These events are a brilliant opportunity to come along and to meet with people. But as I said, we'll get some information out to you so you can read a little bit further on that. And just to do an even greater shameless plug, Marketing Cube is also very excited to be exhibiting at the B2B Marketing Leaders Forum, Asia Pac here in Sydney, which is also in May, on the 14th to the 16th of May. So again, we'll send you some information there so you can have a look at those. But a couple of questions here. So Annabelle, the example today was for registration for a free event. Presumably you could do similar for costed. Annabelle, that's a really good question. So what you're asking essentially is can we add an e-commerce component? So out of the box, Eloqua does not provide an e-commerce level of functionality. There is integration available, I know, with Eventbrite. So if you have something like Eventbrite to manage the e-commerce component, that can actually integrate with Eloqua. That is a paid-for app. It's not a free app, and it's not developed by Eventbrite. It's done by an Oracle partner. But I have seen that work, and it works a treat, and Eventbrite is a good solution for that. There are other ways to incorporate e-commerce, but Annabelle, if you wanted to maybe take that offline or shoot me an email directly, happy to explore that for you. Oh, thank you. Yes, Cvent. Yes, Annabelle, absolutely. Cvent is the other one. And I think I've got a couple of customers who are using Cvent. I've not had that much to do with it, but yes, and a Cvent is also done. What capability does LinkedIn Campaign app have? So if we go back, Jamie, to the description there, that's it's really about the matched audiences function, which is great, and also the lead gen forms. So essentially what that enables you to do is to run a campaign in LinkedIn, present people with a form, and they stay within that LinkedIn environment. But when they submit that form, that information is then sent directly through to Eloqua's campaign canvas. And so once they're on the canvas, well, then you can do anything. You can send them an email, you can push them through to the CRM as a lead. There's a whole range of things you can do. The matched audience component is a little bit like Facebook. It enables you to take your database, for instance, the email addresses, you upload that into LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is then off exploring to find people who are similar to the email address profiles that you've just uploaded. And the form does sit in LinkedIn. Yes, Jamie, that's the nice thing about the Campaign Manager app from LinkedIn is that people remain in LinkedIn and they have a LinkedIn experience. You don't have to take them from LinkedIn and take them out to another landing page, like an Eloqua landing page or something like that, so that they can get on with what they're doing. Are there any other questions that you've got today? And I do apologize for going over time, but we have covered quite a bit there. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to stay on the line for a few more minutes. Thanks, guys. Have a great day, and we'll see you next month. Take care.